let me start by saying thanks very much, Alex, and thank you, Mutu, for having me today. Congratulations on 10 years of Geoawesomeness. I think these kind of events and these communities add a lot to the industry, so it's a privilege to be here. Thanks as well to Chris, Xenia, and Conchita for your presentations. I think there's really not very much that I can add to what Chris has said about the capabilities of the travel time platform, and in Amsterdam have shown a really nice example of how the travel time search functionality can be incorporated into a kind of consumer-facing application. So what I'm going to talk about for the next 15 minutes is how we use the travel time analytics capability at Knight Frank to feed into a whole range of the type of advice that we offer to our customers across several different industries. So I want to start off just by talking a little bit about why we chose travel time, and then I will go into a kind of general example of how we incorporate travel time analysis capabilities into our broader location analysis. And then I'll finish off by calling out a few specific examples of different types of customers that we work with and the kinds of questions that they want us to answer using these capabilities. So I hope you find it interesting. So just briefly to start off with the reasons why we chose the travel time technologies platform specifically. There's quite a strong visual clue in this slide, and it goes back to what Chris was saying about the public transport analysis capability, and in particular the ability to create public transport travel time areas or isochrones, which as far as I'm aware is a unique selling point for travel time. We do have access to quite a few other routing and network analysis capabilities across our research department, but none of them have this capability, or if they do have a public transport modeling capability, it is very, very primitive by comparison. So London is a massively important market for us, as it is for most businesses in the UK. And as many journeys are made using public transport as there are by private vehicles in London. So it's far too many journeys to just simply discard. If you're not exploiting that information, then you don't really have a meaningful understanding of the way that people are behaving. And, you know, that's not just a London-centric thing. It's the case for urban areas across the world. So yeah, it's really quite a fundamentally important capability for us. So in terms of how we use the technology, I know that there are lots of geo experts on attending the meeting, so to some extent I won't be telling many people things that they don't already know, but I think it's useful to just kind of break an example down into its most basic parts and just talk through the story of how we actually apply these capabilities. So everything starts with a location, as illustrated on my map here. It could be a shop, it could be an office, it could be a logistics center, but regardless of what type of location it is, we want to build an understanding of its characteristics by overlaying some other data set. So we work with a very wide range of information at Knight Frank Research. This particular example you may recognize if you work in the UK. This is the Experian mosaic geodemographic classifications. So essentially each color represents a different type of household and different type of people, for want of a better description. So in the course of our routine consultancy projects, we will want to build an understanding of the characteristics of this place. And the best way to do that is by creating a travel time shape and using it as a kind of cookie cutter to select the underlying information. So analytically speaking, it's not an especially complex process, but the difference between the results that we would see if we were using a simple radius would actually be quite significant. So what we have here is a 15-minute travel time. The location is actually a church somewhere in North London. And you can see out to the east, we have one of these characteristic kind of islands where there's a train station or a tube station. And by summarizing the information within this shape, we get a much better understanding of who are the people who have the best access to this particular site. So in this particular case, the vast majority of households within 15 minutes of this location fall into one of three categories. So again, if you're familiar with the Experian Mosaic product, you might be familiar with these already, but essentially the majority are urban cohesion, which is Mosaic's classification for kind of multicultural, middle-class urban homeowners. And then city prosperity and rental hubs, which are a bit more self-descriptive, city prosperity being wealthy city dwellers and rental being a broader kind of category of people who are renting their homes. So what does this actually tell us that's useful? It tells us that if we are finding a location for a product or service that targets or is used by these types of people, we know that this might be a good location. Or at the very least, we have a benchmark that we can use to compare this particular site with other candidate sites. And that tends to be the way that we work. We will have a short list of sites or a range of possible locations, and we can apply these techniques to build a picture of what they're like and their relative suitability based on a range of data. So this is just one example looking at geodemographics, but in practice we would pull in a wide range of data from our own CRM, from the census, various other sources, and typically we would combine different modes of transport to give a general picture and potentially look at a range of travel time distances for each individual site. So what this enables us to do is build up a really comprehensive understanding of the relative suitability of different locations for different purposes. So on that note, I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about the different types of groups of customers who we serve and what their sort of respective concerns and interests are when they're looking for the right location for a particular type of property. The first example I wanted to call out was residential developers. So Xenia and Conchita gave a great demo of how we as individuals can use these type of techniques to find the best location for us in Amsterdam. But you can also look at it from the opposite perspective of the organizations who are building homes in the first place. So they will all have their own target market and a particular sort of price point that the homes that they build fit into. And one place where this is particularly relevant is in the build to rent sector, or BTR. And this is a growing and emerging class of real estate in the UK, particularly, and internationally, that incorporates things like student accommodation and senior living facilities, as well as more general residential accommodation. So clearly there are some very specific demographic niches for some of those products, and some very similar techniques to the ones I was just showing would be very relevant in that case. This is one example of one such development in the great city of Leeds. This is a site called Tower Works, where Legal & General, the insurers, have invested to build this build to rent accommodation. This type of BTR asset is a very popular asset class for kind of large institutional investors like insurers or pension funds, and identifying the optimum location to make sure that they are, they get filled and they get filled quickly is really, really important to their success. And being able to provide the best possible intelligence and information through tools like travel time, helps us to have a competitive edge and to provide the best possible advice to our customers. Just want to touch on 3 other areas briefly. I'm mindful of time. The next area I wanted to discuss was retail. It's obviously been a fairly brutal year for a lot of retailers with the impact of COVID and lockdown. And I think it's more important than ever before for retailers and all businesses to be exploiting the best analysis that they can get access to help plan for the future and mitigate some of the impacts of the pandemic that we're all living through at the moment. So retail is an extremely competitive industry. Retailers would certainly have the same concerns about accessing the right target market, so they would be looking at demographics and the depth of their market, but they will often want to look at the presence of their competitors. So they will be looking at whether they have competitors within a certain travel time of a proposed premises or of their own premises. And they will also want to evaluate locations against their own existing network. So one key aspect to consider is avoiding cannibalizing your own market, or essentially overlapping with your own territory when you have a new location that you're evaluating. And I think successful retailers moving forwards will be the ones who are making use of these types of capabilities and these types of tools. One interesting sort of, again, emerging property type in the UK at the moment is the dark supermarket, the so-called dark supermarket. It's not as scary as it sounds, but and you may be familiar with this concept already, but essentially they are supermarkets that exist for the sole purpose of fulfilling online orders. And some of these operators will have a particular delivery model, maybe using bikes or certain modes of transport to deliver the orders. So again, there's a kind of operational opportunity there to evaluate the suitability of sites at quite a granular level using travel time technologies. The next example I wanted to touch on is office space. So I'm sure the majority of the people who are joining us today work in an office of some description or other, or at least they would be in more normal circumstances. When it comes to selecting the right office, there are obviously some very fundamental considerations about, is it big enough? Does it meet certain functional needs, whether that's for a certain level of security, etc. But location is also absolutely of prime importance. And the larger the office, the deeper you can go and the greater the scope for optimization. And one particular example I wanted to call out, where we applied travel time technology specifically, is that we advised on a relocation for a large insurer for a major office development. And they were very keen to understand what their access to their labor markets would be, so what their access to talent would be for a variety of different proposed sites. And because this is a major long-term and strategic investment, they're also keen to understand what the impact of some kind of ongoing and planned infrastructure updates would be in the UK. So we have one major project called Crossrail, which is an underground line going east to west across London. And Travel Time actually provide separate API endpoints to model some of these capabilities. So you have some of this what-if scenario planning, and that was really useful in that case and enabled us to, again, go the extra mile and provide something that would have been incredibly complex and challenging for us to deliver and build ourselves just at the click of a couple of buttons. So that was a big win from our perspective. And finally, I'm scarcely doing justice to these topics, but I want to keep to time. The final example I wanted to touch on is logistics. So in 2019 in the UK, there was 154 billion kilometer tons of road freight. So the impact of decisions that are made about situating any kind of logistics facility have the scope to, either save or waste vast amounts of money or emissions. It would be another way of looking at it over the course of that facility's lifetime. So again, using the best possible information about where a new site can fit into the existing network that drivers will be able to access, and where it will reach the furthest into areas that aren't already covered by an existing logistics network, really, really fundamental. And this is an area where we might reach more into the traditional routing capabilities of travel time, as well as using the isochrone or travel time area generation. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on any more examples, but I did just want to emphasize the kind of breadth of projects where we've applied these tools and techniques. So they range from educational institutions to central government departments, all the way through to film studios, and even, believe it or not, to pet care facilities. And we see a lot of businesses and a lot of our customers actually they come to us with an understanding of these capabilities and the fact that they exist in a lot of cases. So it's often something that is demanded of us as much as it is something that we recommend to our clients. But having the ability to successfully, exploit these analytical tools and interpret and make use of the very broad range of data that's relevant to real estate is a very important part of what we offer. I think as a business, Knight Frank obviously can go far beyond the advice to actually enable our customers to execute on their plans, whether that's acquiring land, disposing of land, or a whole range of ancillary services. But travel time and similar analysis is an increasingly important part of that. So to recap, I've given a kind of brief overview of what these tools typically look like when we're using them in the office, and some of the types of questions that we answer for a specific group of customers. I think that if there's one thing to take away from this session, apart from use Knight Frank as your estate agent, it would be these capabilities are simply can't be ignored when it comes to understanding human behavior, consumer behavior, any kind of human geography. I think it's absolutely fundamental to having the best understanding of people and how they behave, kind of en masse. So I hope that's been interesting, and I will do my best to answer some questions if we still have a couple of minutes.